Hello viewers, welcome to our program entitled Principles of Financial Management in Schools. In this program we shall be discussing some of the important or major principles that are required for sound management of the financial resources of the schools. Now before we start our discussion, I would also like to provide you the information that this is an interactive program and your comments, suggestions and questions are most welcome. You may interrupt the session, the discussion with your questions, and very soon the toll-free numbers would be scrolled. So you may call at these numbers. Now let us start the discussion. We see that we know very well that the schools are organizations. Just like industrial organizations and many other types of organizations, schools are also organizations. And every organization has got certain kinds of resources. Now what are these kinds of resources? These resources could be human resource, they could be physical resource, or they could also be financial resource. Now we see that financial resources need to be managed well. Like any other resource, financial resource also calls for sound management. And what are the principles on the basis of which such type of management can be carried out? About that we are going to discuss now. And before we initiate the discussion, let us have a quick overview of the aspects that would be included for this discussion. First of all, the definition, importance and the basic premises. Thereafter, the fundamental questions, that is the judicious decision making process for financial management, and then the 3 E's. What these 3 E's are, we would disclose during the discussion, and after that monitoring of financial data, then sources of funds and expending, budgeting, and finally the precautions, the main precautions that should be undertaken, that should be taken. So these are the things that we are going to discuss now. Now first of all, what is financial management? What is meant by financial management? This is a very important question. Now you see that financial management is also a kind of management, and it includes various kinds of activities which could be planning, organizing, controlling, budgeting of the financial resources of an organization, which in our case are the schools, that is the educational institutions. So we see that there are various kinds of activities that are involved. Now we have listed down some, that is planning, organizing, controlling, budgeting, but of course there could be other sorts of activities also. However, these are the main activities that go into financial management. We have to plan the financial transactions. We also have to plan how we are going to maintain the records. We have to plan how to organize the sources. We have to plan the expenses. So we see that it is an entirely planned process. And then organizing the financial activities, the financial resources. So a lot of organization process is also involved. Then we have to control it. We have to keep a check on these activities. So we see that planning, organizing, controlling and budgeting, that is what are our sources of income, what are the sources of funds, and accordingly how much we can afford to expend and in which manner. So these are some of the aspects related to budgeting. So we see that these are some of the main activities that are required for financial management of an organization, which in our case I would repeat are schools. Now how important is it? Why is it so important? Why are we discussing it? Now we see that financial resources are very important for possessing and maintaining the other types of resources. Now let us take the case of human resources of schools. For instance, when we recruit teachers, when we have teachers in the schools, they have to be paid. They have to be paid the salary and the other benefits, the financial benefits that are due to them. And so is the case with the other staff, the other non-teaching staff of the school. So we see that the human resources, and apart from that, not only the teachers and the non-teaching staff, but the students are also the human resources of a school. And for the students also, the schools need to make certain kinds of investments. The schools have to spend. So we see that for the maintenance of the human resource, so that we can have the right type of human resource, we need financial resources. And apart from that, the physical resources, for instance, the building, the campus, not only the development of these things, besides that, their maintenance, the procurement of various kinds of equipments, which may be for the laboratory, for the playground, for the library, for the computer lab, and within the classrooms, within the staff room. So we see that a school requires various kinds of equipments. That is, there is the need for physical resources. And for procuring these physical resources, for maintaining them, we need financial resources. So we see that this is one of the most important reasons, that in order to purchase or procure or recruit other types of resources and to maintain them, we do need financial resources. Apart from that, what else could be the reason? Why is it so important? Now you see that the schools, majority of the schools in India, they are not flush with funds. Most of them have got a shortage of money. And this is not only true for the government schools, but also for the public schools. We could make a general statement that there is a need to generate more income and to manage the existing financial resources well, so that there is no wastage, so that there is no underutilization of funds, and for reasons like this. So we see that owing to these reasons, we need to have a sound management of the financial resources. Now what else? Another very important reason is that the school heads and also the senior teachers who could be assisting the school heads, or those who are aspiring to be school heads, now they may be experts in their own area, in their own discipline, that is the subject that they are teaching. And they may also be having the expertise in pedagogy, that is how to teach. For instance, let me give you an example in this regard. A teacher of life science who has been teaching life science since the last several years has got expertise in her own area and also knows how to teach life science. And when she becomes the school head, she finds herself with no knowledge or no skills that are required for financial management. So we see that most of our teachers do not have the necessary expertise for carrying out activities that are required for financial management. So we see that this type of knowledge is very important for the teachers as well as for the school heads, so that they can carry out their responsibilities well. Now, for the financial management principles, before we discuss them, let me tell you about the basic premises. What are the basic premises from which emerge the principles of financial management? Now, first of all, the sources of funds. The sources of funds that a school has, or for that matter, the funds that the school generates, that particular source, or rather all the sources, have to be legitimate. There absolutely cannot be any illegitimate source of fund. So this is one basic premise. And apart from that, of course, there are rules, regulations and policies for financial management for a school, or for that matter for all the schools that have been set up by the government or are recognized by the government. So we see that within the framework of these rules, regulations and the policies, the financial management has to be carried out. This framework is inviolable. It cannot be violated. And also there are certain established procedures for carrying out accounting, auditing, budgeting. These procedures are well established, and there are certain norms for carrying out these activities that are followed all over in all the schools, in all the organizations, and these procedures have to be followed. It's not that these budgeting or accounting can be done in any way that suits the school or that suits the people concerned. So we see that these established procedures have to be followed, and apart from that, effective financial management strategies have to be developed by the school head and also those who are assisting him or her in carrying out the financial transactions, recording them, that is in all matters of financial management. And apart from that, there is also the necessity for certain precautions, certain cautionary measures have to be adhered to. Certain precautions are there that would minimize the risks regarding the misuse of funds. So we see that these are the basic premises, and apart from that, there is also the need for entrepreneurship for school heads. Now, just as I have said that today the schools are in such a position that there is a need for providing quality education, but quality education again calls for funds, and the schools, as I have just said, are not flush with funds. They have a shortage of funds, most of these schools. So we see that the school head has to be an edupreneur. Now, what is an edupreneur? That is, he has to undertake the activities related to education, and he or she also has to be an entrepreneur. That is, the school head has to generate funds, has to find ways of mobilizing financial resources for the schools. So this is also a basic premise for the school heads of the modern world. And apart from that, the consequences of financial irregularities and wastage of funds could be very serious. You see, the school head and the teachers or any other person who happens to assist the school head would have to face the problems. That is, they would be accountable for any sort of mismanagement. So these are the premises within which the principles of financial management have to be applied. Now coming to the main aspects. Now, what are the fundamental questions that would in turn dictate the financial management aspects? So we could have questions like why, then when, where, and how related to financial activities. First of all, let us take up the question why. Now, this is the question that would tell us about utility. In case a school head has framed these questions before undertaking any sort of financial transaction or any sort of financial activity, then the why question would tell the principal or the school head regarding the utility of that particular financial activity. That is, why is this particular activity being undertaken? For instance, if new classrooms are to be added, that is, the building has to be extended, then there has to be a rationale, there has to be sound reason why that type of extension is being carried out. Or for instance, the principal decides to purchase television sets for the school, then that also has to be justified, that why at this particular moment these television sets are being procured, how they would be helpful to the teaching learning activities of the school. So we see that the first and foremost question happens to be that of utility. Then coming to the when part, that is the priority. Now you see that the school head might have to undertake a number of activities, a number of financial transactions. Now, which one to carry out first? For instance, if scholarships are to be given to the poor students, and then prizes are to be awarded, television sets have to be procured, computers have to be procured, a filter has to be installed for clean drinking water, a staff room has to be built. There could be so many kinds of activities. And then which one to undertake first? Which one could be undertaken later on? These things have to be decided judiciously by the school head. And the persons who are involved in making these types of decisions will have to prepare a list of priorities, that is prioritization of the financial activities. For instance, if there is a shortage of classrooms, the students do not have a place to sit or do not have the right kind of furniture, that would definitely have more priority than purchasing television set, or for extending or for buying costly equipments for the playground. So as per the needs, now these needs are also unique for every school. So as per the needs of the school, as per the requirements of the school, the priorities have to be set by the people who are involved in financial management. So this question, the when question, would give us the priority, that is when to undertake which particular activity. Then after that, where, that is from where to procure, to whom do we approach. Now you see, there may be many bidders. Now among these various bidders, which vendor to select? So for this it is required to undertake a survey and make the cost estimation. For instance, a school is about to purchase computers or printers. Now there could be many bidders. Now which particular vendor would be the most suitable? For that there has to be proper decision making process. So we see that a survey has to be carried out. It is not that one particular vendor is approached and then the order is placed with that particular vendor. It is not so. Rather, a survey has to be carried out. The quotations have to be taken from the bidders and discussions could be there following that, and after that the principal may also go for consultation with experts, with the teachers of the school, and then after that decide, keeping in factor of not only the cost estimation. Cost estimation is definitely important, it is very important, but beyond that there are many other things to consider. For instance, the after sales services, the maintenance part, the guarantee, the warranty, and so many other things are there. Whether the payment has to be made in installment, whether the vendor would allow that, or whether the vendor would require down payment that is which has to be made through one installment. So these things have to be considered. So this would give us the answer to the where question, that is where to go, from whom to buy. Now coming to the next question, which is very important, that is the how part. How to go about it, how to make the purchase. Now we see that in the previous question we have been talking about the survey and the cost estimation. So we see that following the survey and the cost estimation, we have the data with us, and this data requires to be analyzed. So the first part is data collection, and thereafter the analysis of the data. This analysis of the data has to be along certain parameters, among which of course the most important one is the cost, that is the expenses that would be involved. The other parameters, as I have been just discussing, could be the maintenance part, that is the after sales services part, and the other parameters that justify the buying of that particular thing. So we see that along these parameters the data collected has to be analyzed, and after that the decision would be taken. Now another important thing is reflection on the value for money. What does it mean? The principal, the school head, or anyone who is involved in carrying out this financial transaction or is responsible for it has to take up reflection, has to reflect on the purchase that is to be made or on the investment that is to be made, and this reflection is on the value for money. What does it mean? That is whether the purchase would be worth, whether full benefit can be accrued from that particular transaction. Now in this regard I would like to give you an example. For instance, the school decides to buy a school bus, to procure a school bus for ferrying children from their home to school and back. Now the principal first has to see, those who are involved in the decision making process have to consider how many children would be availing this service. It may be that the children already have made their arrangement and they are coming through their own vehicle, by their own vehicle, or they have got other transport services that are available, and they may not like to be they may not like to travel through this bus that is being procured, that is being purchased. So this may be one condition. And apart from that, whether the maintenance cost of the bus, whether the revenue that would be generated, that is the transportation fees, would be enough to make up for the cost or to make up for the investment that is being made. Now these things have to be considered. So the principal has to reflect on the value for the money that is being invested, and he or she would like to compare it on with the investment that is being made for the purchase of computers. So instead of that, if computers are purchased for the computer lab, and if the students are spending some quality time developing ICT skills as well as using the computers as tools for learning, if the teachers are using them as tools for teaching, then the value for money would be there. So this of course is again unique to the requirements of every institution, and there cannot be any set parameters, any fixed norms for that, and following the reflection on the value for money, the school head would be able to arrive at a decision. And of course the mode of payment is important, as I have been just saying that our schools have got a shortage of funds. So in case the vendor allows payments in installments, then that could be suitable for some schools. Instead of cash down payment, this could suit the needs of some schools. So the mode of payment is very important. Then again, how many installments are being allowed, the rate of interest, all these things have to be taken into consideration. And apart from that, at the end of it, there is a need to make a clear statement, that is to articulate why that particular financial transaction is being undertaken, because at the end of the day it is the school head who would be responsible, who would be accountable for having undertaken that particular financial transaction. So it is better to articulate at the very beginning itself, before the investment has been made, before the decision to go for some financial activity has been taken, to articulate very clearly why that particular financial activity is being taken and how it would be useful for the school. So these are some of the fundamental questions on the basis of which the principles of financial management can be constructed, can be developed. Now we see that financial management not only rests on these questions that we have been discussing so far, but also on the judicious decision making process. So this is also a very important principle, that the decision making process has to be judicious. Now what are these decisions? To which aspects do these decisions pertain? And why do we say that this decision making process has to be judicious? Now first of all, there is a need to quantify all the direct and the indirect costs, the capital expenditure, the recurring expenditure and other things. Now let me give you an example in this regard. For instance, the direct costs. Now what could be the direct costs for a school? There could be many. For instance, awarding scholarships, then awarding prizes, and then again procuring medals for the meritorious, or purchasing books for the poor students, and so many things could be there. So these are some of the direct costs that are involved. And now coming to the indirect costs, we know that school as an organization also has to spend some amount on the indirect costs. Now what are these indirect costs? Well, there are many. For instance, maintaining the building, maintaining the campus, paying the electricity bills, paying the telephone bills, and many other things could be there, which could be the indirect costs. So we see that now these are also not fixed. They could vary from school to school. So we see that these things have to be considered, and apart from that, the capital expenditure. Now going back to the example of the procurement of television sets, we could say that the investment that is being made for procuring the television sets could be the capital expenditure, or developing a new wing for the school building that already exists within the campus. That could be a capital expenditure. Now these are just examples, and I repeat that they could vary from school to school. So, and then again, paying the cable service provider the monthly payment, that could be the recurring expenditure. So we see that before making an investment, not only the capital expenditure but the recurring expenditure also has to be kept in mind, that how much money am I going to shell out in order to maintain this particular asset of mine, that is for the school, that the asset that has been procured, how is it going to be maintained, what would be the recurring expenses. So these things are very important, and these points of course come within the judicious decision making process. Now apart from that, we also need to compare the previous similar proposals that have been made. For instance, in the previous year there could have been a proposal to purchase television sets or to purchase computers. So what were the cost estimations made then? Why that particular proposal was approved or not approved? How much expense under various heads were involved within that? So if there are certain proposals that are similar in nature, certain previous proposals that are similar in nature, they have to be located and they have to be analyzed before taking any decision for the current proposal. So we see that the previous similar proposals are also very important, and they also need to be considered. And then it is very important to estimate the cost vis-a-vis the funds that are available, or vis-a-vis the anticipated sources of money, the sources of funds. Now in this regard, let me give you an example. For instance, the cost that would be incurred, the investment that had to be made for building a few more classrooms within that or for extending that particular building, vis-a-vis the grant, the aid that would be available from the government for that particular purpose, or the resources that can be mobilized. How much resources we can mobilize for this particular head and how much would be the cost. So it is always better to have a comparison of the cost that would be involved vis-a-vis the funds that are already available, or to have an anticipation of the funds that would be available for that particular head. So we see that it is very important to compare the previous proposal and also to make an estimate regarding the funds that are available. Now you see that we know very well that the funds available for a particular head cannot be wired to some other head. For instance, if there are funds that are available from the government for building extension, of course it cannot be used for purchasing television or for computer or for paying the salary of the teachers. So this is one thing that has to be kept in mind. This is something that needs to be considered. So whenever we are making the estimates, it has to be vis-a-vis the funds that are available for that particular head. So we see that this is another important thing that has to be kept in mind. And apart from that, what are the risks involved? What could be the risks involved? Now in this regard also I would like to give you an example. For instance, in order to mobilize resources for the school, a school head and the senior teachers decide to take up some horticultural activities with the help of the students. This would definitely provide the school with an opportunity to mobilize resources by selling the products of the horticultural activities, maybe the fruits, the flowers and other such things. And it would also definitely provide the students of the school with some experience regarding gardening. That is, for vocational education this could be useful. But at the same time, before undertaking this kind of activity, the amount that is spent, say, on seeds or on buying plants and then maintaining the nursery, maintaining the garden, the costs that are involved, this has to be taken into consideration vis-a-vis the funds that would be generated by the sale of the products. Now, the children or the teachers may not have that sort of expertise, may not have that sort of knowledge which is required for farming on a commercial scale, for undertaking horticultural activities, I should rather say, that would bring about some profits. So, especially during the first few years, it may be really difficult. So, before making investment on a large scale, the prevailing expertise, the prevailing level of expertise, the knowledge, these things have to be considered. Otherwise, if a lot of money is invested in the procurement of seeds and in other things that are required for such kinds of activities, they may go waste if the value for money is not obtained. So, we see that there could be risks involved, and there are other activities also, for instance, maintaining some domestic animals, but that is livestock, poultry. This could be an option for mobilizing resources or mobilizing funds for the school. But how much expertise is there with the school to carry out such kinds of activities? For instance, if the animals die or if the yield is low, then there would not be that much of products to sell. So, these are the risks involved, and with every kind of activity there may be a different set of risks, and these the risk factor has to be taken into consideration. So, these are some of the aspects that go in for judicious decision making. You could think of something else, something even more important. Now, coming to the 3 E's. What are these 3 E's? Now, these 3 E's, we could say, are very important, are fundamental to sound financial management. They are the pillars of or we could say they are very important principles for financial management. Now, what are these 3 E's? First of all, economy. Then comes effectiveness, and then comes equity. Now, let us discuss them one by one. Coming to the first part, that is economy. Now, whenever there are 2 options or more options or alternatives, of course, the school head has to go for the one that is economic. As I was just saying, that in case there are many bidders, in case there are many who are offering the same sort of products, the same sort of wares, then of course it has to be seen which option is the most economic one. But here it is also equally important to stress, to emphasize that this kind of economy is not to be at the expense of quality. Of course, keeping in factor the importance of quality without sacrificing the quality element, economy is very important. So, we see that, and besides that also, while undertaking any sort of expense, it is advisable for the schools to be as economic as possible, because of the simple reason that had been stated right at the beginning of the program, that our schools in generally face a shortage of funds. So, economy is very important. Then coming to effectiveness. Now, this is what we had been discussing regarding the value for money. Before making any sort of purchase, it has to be seen how effective it is going to be for the students, for the teaching learning purpose. For instance, a school in some rural part, if that school decides to buy some computers or some television sets, now the school first has to consider about the electricity supply. Now, in many parts of the country, especially in the rural areas, the electricity supply is quite erratic, or the voltage may be very low. So, in that case, especially during the school hours, if this happens, then not much use could be made out of the television sets that are being purchased. So, in that case, they would not be effective. Similarly, for computers, if computers are purchased, but there is no teacher in that school at that moment who could provide the children with the necessary skills to operate those computers, then there is no point in buying those computers right at that moment. And this is not only for rural schools, but for any schools, even in the urban places, until and unless there is a teacher who could deal with the students in the computer classes, who could teach the students during the computer classes, then there is no point in going for that type of purchase, as it would not be effective. So we see that besides economy, the effectiveness is also very important. And of course, another factor which is very important is equity. Equity could mean many things, and especially having a just approach, being fair to all. Now you see that, for instance, if the school head decides, for example, to have a staff room for the senior teachers, he or she also has to realize, has to think that it is not only with the senior teachers, with the postgraduate teachers, but even the primary teachers need a staff room. And if library facilities are there with a number of books for one particular subject, but is not having books on other subjects, then we would not say that it is an equitable sort of distribution. So the funds that are available with the school, before making any type of before undertaking any type of financial activity, it has to be ensured that there would be equity, that there would not be any deprivation as a result of carrying out an activity. So we see that these are the 3 E's which are very important for financial management. Now another important thing is how to monitor the financial data. Now we have to do certain things about it. For instance, reviewing the revenue and the expenses at the end of each accounting period. Now you see, the accounting period of course is not fixed. It could vary from school to school. For some it could be a few months, for some it could be a few weeks or a year, or at certain regular intervals this accounting period is over, is complete. So we see that the school head and also the people who are assisting him or her have to review the revenue, that is the sources of funds, how much funds are available, how much funds are arriving, and also the expenses that have been undertaken, whether they match or not, whether there is any surplus, whether there is any deficit. So these things have to be considered. So the revenue and expenses, these 2 parts which are very important, have to be tallied, have to be reviewed rather, at the end of each accounting period. Then another important thing is that there should be detailed and accurate maintenance of financial records. Every detail, every specificity is required, of course, if they are relevant, and they should also be accurate. It is better to maintain accurate instead of rounding them off. It is better to maintain accurate reportings, accurate data, and these activities should be carried out according to the established practices of accounting. It cannot be maintained in any form that suits the school or any form that is convenient to the school head. No, they have to be maintained as per the established procedures of accounting. So that is also very important, and the school head has to ensure this. And apart from that, these reports should enlist all the sources of funds and also all the expenses that have been incurred. Here we see that all the sources, all the expenses, these are very important. So the school head has to maintain a regular record, or rather ensure that regularly these records are being maintained, these records are being updated so as not to miss something. And then also supporting documents should be attached along with these reports wherever they are necessary, so as to validate these records, so that there is no doubt about the data that is being maintained. So these are some of the important things to do regarding the financial monitoring of financial data. Now coming to another very important thing is the sources of funds. Now as I have been telling you right in the beginning, that they have to be legitimate and they have to be ethical. Now you see, the school can only have funds, not only schools but for that matter funds should always have a legal source. That is, they could be from the government, they could be in the form of fees, or they could also be generated through donation or from the charitable sources, but whatever these sources are, they have to be legitimate sources. And apart from that, another very important thing is ethical. Now you see that we keep on emphasizing the need for the school heads to be entrepreneurs, the need for them to generate funds. But this cannot be at the cost of ethics. For instance, the school may organize an annual function and may sell tickets, and at the same time may ask students to go from door to door collecting money. Now, how ethical are these activities? How ethical is it for the student to go from door to door collecting money for the school? So these things have to be considered. Or what sort of activities would be there in the annual function? So as to draw a crowd, we cannot include within the annual function activities those activities that are not ethical for a school. So a school head also has to keep in mind that the sources of funds, that the funds generated are only and only from legitimate sources, and they are generated in an ethical way, that is without compromising the morality part. Now, how to expend? We have been discussing the sources of fund. Now, how to spend them? We see that we have to spend them as per the established, or as I was talking about, the policies, rules and regulations that together comprise a framework within which the financial management has to be carried out. The financial rules and regulations cannot be violated, and hence it is important for the school head to be aware of these rules, regulations and policies and see to it that under no circumstances they are violated. Now, coming to the budgeting part, it is important to have a look at the previous year's budget so as to get an idea for preparing the budget for the current year. The budget should be realistic. That is, what are the sources of income? What are the expenses that would be undertaken? These things should be realistic. And apart from that, the funds that have been earmarked in the budget have to be strictly adhered to. And besides that, there is a need to regularly compare the actual financial reserves with the budgetary provisions. And it is also important to bring to the notice of the school head the deviations from the records that have been maintained, from the financial records. If there is any surplus, there is any deficit, they have to be maintained. They have to be reported. And some basic precautions: the cash has to be deposited on the very same day or at the earliest, and the same with the checks, and there should be regular monitoring of those dealing with funds. And it is also important to ensure that there is no tampering of the data, of the digitalized data, and the records are in safe custody, and also to prepare a physical inventory of the equipments, of the physical assets, and to check them from time to time, to tally them against the resources. So, actual resources. So, we see that we have been discussing some of the important principles of financial management, and if you have any questions, you may email this to me at the ID that would be provided to you now. Thank you.